All right, well, good morning. Thank you for taking a look at this. My name is Caleb Deer. I'm the youth pastor here at Sierra Bible Church, Truckee, and these are my parents, Mick and Shelly Deero. I guess I almost want to start off, where did you guys grow up? And, a little bit about your first experience with God, discovering who he was, meeting the person of God.
Well, honey, go first.
I grew up in, for the most part, a Christian home. One of my earliest memories is my dad pulling me into the living room, sitting in an olive green leather chair, and telling me the gospel and saying the sinner's prayer with me, asking me if I wanted to say the sinner's prayer, ask Jesus in my heart. And I had relayed that memory to my mom, and she said I was probably about 4 when that happened. And when I was in the 6th grade, my dad became a senior pastor of a Calvary Chapel church. So I was blessed to have just a lot of the word, a lot of the gospel in our home growing up. For me personally, it's when you're a kid raised in a Christian home, there's a process that happens. The word is given to you. You're told to go to church. A lot of times you are happy to do that. You love the community, the friendships. But then, a time comes when you realize that I think for most kids, they either, one, make the choice to say that this isn't how I want to live my life, and they walk away from it. Or 2, it has to at some point become their own. It's no longer something that their parents is leading and guiding. It becomes a personal relationship between you and your Heavenly Father. And that happened for me in small stages. In high school, definitely started developing my own personal relationship. But when I went away, I went with an organization called Youth with a Mission when I was 17. And a big, big step in my walk with the Lord took place overseas in India when I had been watching my team. We had been out on the street witnessing and sharing the Lord with just a lot of the very, very poor in the city of Bombay. And one man that they were sharing the gospel with had no legs and lived on the street, was really, really poor. He pushed himself around on a skateboard to get around. He did drugs. He was filthy dirty and just begged for money for his livelihood. Any scrap of bread, drug that he took came from begging. And as they shared the gospel with him, in my 17-year-old, very American mindset, I just thought there's no possible way that even if this guy did get saved, it is going to have the ability to change his life. He's too bad. He's too poor. He's too far gone. And I just thought, no. And I didn't participate in that. I didn't participate in getting to know this man and sharing the gospel with him because I think it just frightened me. So a few weeks went by. He gets saved. His countenance changes. He starts hanging out with our group. You see joy, you see light. They introduce him to a local Christian pastor there, and he starts to develop a relationship with that local church. And I watched this man's life transform. And I remember thinking as a 17-year-old, I have everything. I come from this, wealthy country. I have a family. I have my health. And I found myself being envious of this man who seemed to have something that I didn't. He seemed to have a relationship with God that I thought I had, but I was recognizing that I was lacking something. And I had a moment that same week where the whole entire team left to go up country somewhere, and I had to stay behind because I was having some teeth issues. My wisdom teeth were coming in, and I was in a lot of pain. And I remember getting down on my face and asking God, I don't know you the way that man knows you, but I want to. And that was the beginning. I felt him. I was alone in a room. I was down on my knees, and I felt him. I felt his presence in that room. And I think that was definitely the beginning of a real personal relationship with him.
Dad?
Question again?
Where did you grow up? Just a little bit of background of your kind of life story, but then your first experience in the presence of God himself, you know, that kind of defining moment.
Well, I grew up in Orange County through the 60s. My first skateboard had clay wheels on it, and I rode Stingrays, and it was sunny all the time, and we were outside all the time. And I remember in that era, you know, it was kind of funny. That's the Jesus movement and the heart of a lot of what was going on. You know, a lot of hippies in California, and God was moving amongst the hippies. And so there was media and different things around me, although I remember the I Found It bumper stickers. Well, what is that? But when little things in the media I would see it turning on some TV show in the morning on a Saturday waiting for cartoons, and there was some religious broadcasting, and it kind of always intrigued me. I remember one time going to the carnival that came through town, and they set up, but they had a stage, and local acts were playing. And I was down there as a kid, and I was standing in front of these guy had really long blonde hair and a great cool beard, and they were singing, and just a smattering of people in this natural amphitheater at probably 11 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, you know, not exactly prime time. And if you saw that scene, you would see this one kid who's probably 8 years old standing 10 feet from the stage looking up going, what the heck are you guys singing about? And they were Jesus freaks. And I just, you know, that kind of thing would just come and just stop me in my tracks every now and then. I remember we went to a Christian camp, and they kind of shared some stuff, and they had me praying a prayer, and I didn't know anything about what I was doing. And I kind of went home and I guess I'm supposed to be religious, but that kind of evaporates. But I met a girl. I moved to Yosemite, and I met a girl who was from South Dakota, and she had a Bible around, and she didn't have the best walk with the Lord, but she was a really great gal. We ended up getting married, and I started going to Bible studies with her and stuff like that. In fact, well, actually, the first Bible study I went to was when I was working in Yosemite, I became a rock climber, and I kind of did an early trip up El Capitan long before I was really ready, and I was a little bit scared at times on that multi-day climb, and I remember going, God, if you get me out of this, I will go to Bible study, and because there was a little Bible study meeting there in Yosemite Valley that I was aware of, and so I'm working in Yosemite, I'm climbing this thing, I get down off El Cap, and I show up at that Bible study, and they're all kind of look at me and like, what are you doing here? Because they kind of knew of me, and I said, well, I was on El Cap. I was really scared. I told God, if you get me down, I'll go to Bible study. So here I am. That was it. I was fulfilling my thing, and ended up marrying that gal. We ended up going through a nasty divorce, and that's what really made me turn to the Lord. I'd started going to church with her when we moved to Tahoe, and our marriage lasted about 5 years before we split up. But about 3 of those years were spent in Tahoe, and I started going to church here, and you know, I liked the music. I didn't really understand what the guy was saying up there, but you know, sometimes on long rock climbs, I'd sing those songs to myself, and I had a rock climbing partner who used to go to church too, but I came home from a climbing trip in China, and my wife was pregnant with another guy's kid. They were both on the worship team. It was a big scandal in the church, and you know, it just showed me that I had been running my own life. In fact, we're sitting in a car, and she says, I have something to tell you. And Yeah, I know we've been having some serious marriage problems for about a year, but she says I've been having an affair with such and such, and I'm pregnant with his kid. And the first thing that came to my mind was, wow, I've been running my own life, and I've run it right into the ground. And that's kind of because, God was making plays for my life. He wanted to be the Lord of my life, but I wanted to go rock climbing. I didn't want to listen to him. I wanted to run my own life. I thought I could make myself happy, and I just really, in an addictive kind of way, was really into rock climbing. And I kind of just surrendered my life, and God became very real. Became very real. And I was just completely broken for many, many months, long, painful divorce. But it's what it took for me to really surrender. I just was such a mess that it was just such a painful thing and such a difficult divorce that it was easy to surrender at that point.
Can you think of was it more of a slow process of waking up to a relationship with the Lord? Or was there a defining moment, even through all that like, that's God speaking to me? And like the light bulb kind of turned on for the first time.
I think there's a scenario there and I think I've seen it in other people. You go through something difficult, you start calling out to God, and he's gracious and merciful, and he makes himself known and real, and he's there. And he's not making demands on you at that point. He's comforting you. He's getting you through. But there comes a point where if this is going to continue, you have to take your role and let him take his role in your life. And that role is he's God and you're his servant. He bought your life. And you've got to reconcile that. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense that Jesus dies and you go on and do whatever you want. You run your own life. That's not how it's set up. And that's a big crux for people that they never get over. Jesus didn't work for me. Well, because you never let him have the wheel. Let's break out in song. And that happened for me. I went through that just painful period hanging on to Jesus, but then about 9 months later, I felt strong enough. And it was climbing season again, and I wanted to go climbing. And I heard that still small voice say, "Don't go climbing." And I'm like, I got to go climbing, Lord. This is who I am. This is what I do. And I went. And spring climbing season was great, and I climbed all that summer. And as that happened, I knew there was a God, and I was experiencing him, and I was enjoying it, reading his word, and it just descended. I didn't want to leave him, but as I said, I just want to run my own life. He just got dimmer and dimmer, and I just kind of went down. One of the things when you first get saved and you're not raised in a Christian home is all of a sudden you start talking to people in truth, real, and it's very black and white. I mean, you go out and then all of a sudden I wanted to have that same kind of real conversation with people, and I couldn't. And you kind of like that. You long for that. You long for the truth, that real koinonia, that real fellowship. It only happens with Jesus. It only happens in walking in the light. It only happens in walking with him. And so life's getting just darker. And I went climbing that fall, and it just didn't go that good. And I came home, and I'm like, Lord, I don't know, whatever it takes, but I got to have you in my life. I can't live this way. I can't live, it's just not happening anymore. And, my background in this is very Tahoe trucky-ish. I like sports. I like outdoor sports. And I bought two Nordic ski passes, one because I lived on the North Shore of Tahoe, one in Tahoe City there in the Highlands, and one at Royal Gorge. And I was going to go skate skiing all winter long, and which I enjoyed. And I went out to Royal Gorge the first day of the season, and I'm skating along. I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to ski like crazy. And I heard that same still small voice, don't go skiing. And I'm like, what? You got to be kidding. I got 2 ski passes. That doesn't make any sense at all. Why would I not go skiing? But I knew that voice. And I knew that God was saying, well, I didn't totally know what he had in store. Other than I had to obey. And I could sense the pride as he kind of put that play on my life. I could kind of sense the pride around those sports and stuff. And so, well, that's not good, you know. So for about 3 days, I remember just grumbling. God doesn't want me to go skiing. It's one of the elders in the church asked me, hey, Mick, how's it going? Man, God's this. And you're taking away my skiing. I don't understand. And he just looks at me. I remember he just had that quirky smile on his face, like he knew. He knew something. And 3 days later, from that time when I had that God made that play, all of a sudden, and this is just my story, and it's what happened, and I can and you can find it in the Word. You can't say it's not biblical, but all of a sudden my reality changed. I felt like I burst through a set of doors into a throne room, a reality with Him. He was really there, and I was really with Him, and He was very accessible. And I began really about probably a year and a half of just, I was working at night as a waiter, and all day long I just read the Word. And it was changing my mind. It was changing my thinking. It was dramatic. I remember one time kind of freaking out going, I'd go downstairs and I'd grind up some coffee and make a big cup, and I'd go upstairs and all the roommates left, and I'd open up that Word and it would just go, woof. And it was like, anyway, this one day, I kind of started freaking out. I'm like, there's somebody else in this room. This is just too weird. And I looked down the Word, and it was open to the passage in Corinthians where it says, you have the mind of Christ. And that just said to me, Lord, there is somebody else in this room. It's you. And it was just so palpable. And that began to kind of wane, and not because of disobedience, but people sometimes they call that the honeymoon phase. But it changed my thinking. It changed who I was. It changed how I looked at the world. I began to look at everything through the lens of Scripture. People say you put on the Jesus lenses, and that's how you go through life. And it's very true. You have to view everything through the lens of Scripture, and that really changed me and launched me to a life of walking with Him. But the best thing about it is, the greatest thing in my life was having my life completely destroyed in that nasty divorce. It just makes you receptive. So hard times can bring about good things.
Experiencing the presence of God, if that's happened in your life, you know it. If you're kind of like, I'm not really sure if I've experienced God or not, then you haven't. And that's not to be exclusive. That is to push you into the most inclusive situation possible. It's not to say like you're outside the club. It's to say, please join the club.
But it's nice to recognize, just as Shelly did, that she was outside.
Yes.
And begin to ask.
Yes.
He says, our God is not going to keep the door shut.
No, but the way to get inside the club is to first recognize you're out. And if you don't do that, you may run the risk of just kind of walking through this life asleep.
I would say as I continued on with my walk in the Lord, I still recognized feeling outside that club. I could look around and I could see other Christians that I admired and that I respected their walk with the Lord, and I saw that they had this spark, this extra, they were excited about the Word. They talked about the Lord all the time. And even in my marriage, Mick I viewed him as somebody inside the club, that he would talk to me about his quiet times, and he'd, remind me that I needed to have mine. And I would do it out of duty. I would do it out of, I know it's the right thing, and out of obedience. I'd go sit down, I'd open up my Bible, I'd spend time in the Word, I would read, but I would walk away more times than not frustrated, feeling like I did my job. I did what I was supposed to do as a Christian, but I was not getting out of it what I would see him get out of it. And it left me feeling pretty frustrated. And that frustration, eventually, as a mom raising 3 kids, I saw my lack even in that area. And that is where it started to hurt me the most. Because when I saw that I wasn't the kind of mom that I wanted to be, that made me more desperate. Because I realized these 3 little people needed me to be something more. And I couldn't seem to get there. And the more desperate I got, the more I just cried out to the Lord. And there was a moment, again, where I, out of that desperation, just cried out to him again and said, I need to know what this is. I need to be inside that club. I need to feel your spirit working inside of me and living your life through me. And I would say that's when I felt like I had that experience where I busted through those doors. To me, the way I describe it is I felt like scales fell off my eyes, like when you read about Paul, when he was blinded and then he was touched by the Lord and those scales fell off his eyes and he could see again. I felt like I saw clearly for the first time things of God, things that the word all of a sudden made sense. When I did have a quiet time, I got it. When God spoke to me, I knew it was him. And I felt like I was inside the club at that point.
How old were you when that happened?
27.
27.
Maybe 20. You know, I might have been 29 even. I remember Gabe was born when I was 27, and that was my third kid, and I think that sort of challenged me all the more, and part of that desperation.
Acts chapter 17, verse 26 says this, "And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, yet he is actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being." So that is a neat picture here. You know, on one hand, for when you're getting introduced to the Lord, when you're discovering him, it really feels like you're feeling your way and you eventually find him. But when you actually do find him, you discover, oh, you've set this all up. You've predestined where I'm going to live, when I'm going to live, who my parents are, what would happen throughout my life so that I would find you. You set all that up. And then you find that he has not been far from you this whole time, that he has been pursuing you and guiding you to find him, to find peace and joy. And so on one hand, it feels like you're really trying to find God and you're doing all this work, but then when you do find him, he was there all the time, leading you. You know, kind of moving on from this place, I'd almost like to try and practically talk to students about how do you get this experience for yourself? How do you interact with God, meet God, come into his throne room? As simply as I can make it, you ask, Lord, I want to meet with you. I'm hearing that there's more. I've been told that there's more, and I do believe that. I see these other people interacting with you in a way that I don't. I want more, Lord. I want to know you more. Jeremiah 33:3 says, "Call to me, and I will show you great and mighty things you do not yet know."
There were two, up to that point, up to being 27 years old, those were only 2 times that I can remember in my life that I got down on my knees and desperately cried out to God to come, talk to me, let me know you're real, I need you, and he showed up. And I'm only just now thinking of this as you're talking about it, but I wonder, had I asked more, how many more times God would have showed up. I only asked those 2 times, and God met me there. Out of real, what's that verse that says, when you seek me with your whole heart, you will find me? I can say that I, maybe at times was like, oh God, I want to know you. But when I sought him with my whole heart, hungry, he showed up. And I think there's a couple of different things that maybe kids deal with. One is, I've said that, I've asked that, and I'm frustrated because it didn't happen. I've experienced that. There were times where I thought I was asking him. I thought I was desperate. And yet he kind of let me go on. He let me struggle. He let me get hungrier. He let me get more desperate. And I just don't want them to feel like, well, I tried that and it didn't work. There's a timing that God has in all of it.
What am I not doing right? How do I ask with my whole heart? Yeah. I would almost say if you've actually made it this far in the video, you're on the right track. You are here. You must be saved. If you've watched enough this up to this point, you must have some sort of relationship with Jesus. It's always growing. It's always, we're experiencing the gospel every day in our life. And it's always further up and further in. But if you made it this far, I want to encourage you. It's because you are hungry. You are asking for more of God. And even back to that verse that I quoted out of Acts 17, it's hindsight's 20/20. You look back and you see very clearly, oh, I see what he was doing there. I see where my heart wasn't quite right there. You'll never know in the moment. It's always going to feel, even for mature Christians, when they are going through those moments of drawing closer to the Lord, it often feels like you're feeling your way through. And then you find him, and then you find that he's been there all along. And so that, don't get discouraged with that experience. It is a part of the process. And there's a dynamic of faith there that you feel like you're reaching in the dark a little bit, and then you find light itself.
I tell people, when you kind of start taking that step toward God, it doesn't have to be a ton of time. Just lend an ear. Yeah. The decision will come. Decisions will have to be made, but just take a step toward them.
Use this time. Don't numb yourself. Don't check out. It's really important to allow yourself to feel really the pain of the situation. And we will, as Americans, will do anything we can to not feel the pain of the situation. Don't do that. Let God comfort you. Let him meet you in that place. Don't numb yourself to it. Let God heal you.
You need God. You need more of him in your life. And how you get that is test him in it. Go open up your word. Go ask him to meet with you. Go get down on your face. It might feel like you're acting something out. Like, this is something that somebody else would do, not me. I'm just acting this out in a very awkward way. But what we're suggesting is give it a try. Go give it a try. Open up your Bible, grab your journal, grab your pen, and expect God to meet you. Because he desperately wants to, because he loves you so much.